Alright, today I'm going to try to explain to you how to create a personal treatment plan for yourself if you're experiencing gender dysphoria. For anybody that has experienced or is experiencing gender dysphoria, you know how extremely painful that is. And, the thing about gender dysphoria, it's not going to go away by wishing it. It just doesn't. You have to be an active participant in alleviating your gender dysphoria. Now, I've talked before that gender dysphoria is just a lack of alignment between what is your gender and your physical presence. And our physical presence is more than just our body parts. Our physical presence is everything physical. It's what you see in the mirror. It's what others are seeing that you are perceiving as incorrect based on what your gender is telling you, what your mind is telling you, what your thought process is telling you. There's a disconnect between the two. It's called a lack of alignment. There's a reason that cisgender is called cisgender. Cis is a Latin word that means aligned with. And so for the cisgender person, these things are aligned. Their gender and their physical presence are aligned, and they feel no gender dysphoria. For a transgender person, we're typically denied or told that we're not supposed to have our preferred self-expression, which would alleviate a lot of gender dysphoria based on how our physical presence looks to ourselves and others. And this creates that gender dysphoria because it creates that lack of alignment. Now, I've broken gender dysphoria into three distinct types. And that isn't to say that someone who is experiencing gender dysphoria is feeling one but not the others. Transgender people, typically, if you have gender dysphoria, you experience all three types. They're just varying degrees for the individual. And those varying degrees is what I call dysphoric centers. Your dysphoric center may be more to self-expression, or it may be more to the body. And, so those are your dysphoric centers leaning more heavily to one or the other. Now, each one of these types can be treated, cured, or at least managed. But they're done in different ways. So let me explain type 1 gender dysphoria. Type 1 gender dysphoria are symptoms that center around self-expression. This is typically for anybody that, for myself, I knew that I was, female at 3 years old. I mean, it became very apparent at 5 when I started school. And it was obvious to me that, I wasn't a boy because they were throwing me over with the boys, and I wanted to be with the girls. But it was very apparent to me, and I won't go into the entire story. So my gender dysphoria started at 5 years old. Now, within, being a child with gender dysphoria, it's still difficult. It's extremely difficult, but it's a milder form, and it only centers around self-expression because as a child prior to puberty, you haven't started developing those secondary sexual characteristics, and you don't really get into type 2 gender dysphoria until that happens. So type 1 gender dysphoria are symptoms that center around self-expression. This type can be managed through allowing the mind its natural flow of self-expression. Because often, don't we? We repress. We put up a false persona for the world in order to protect ourselves. I know that there's more and more people that are like, screw it, this is who I am. And that's wonderful. But for the vast majority of transgender people, we tend to put up a false persona. And try to kind of fit in more into society. But what we're doing also is going against our natural tendencies. We're like a salmon fighting to swim upstream because I know for myself, until I allowed my mind to work in its natural way, I was constantly rethinking. I was rethinking every thought, every action, every mannerism, thinking, what would a guy do? Versus what was just natural for myself. So It can be managed through allowing the mind its natural flow of self-expression. When coming out of the closet, or if a decision is made to transition to full-time presentation without coming out of the closet, and this is often called stealth. Type 1 can be managed to varying degrees while in the closet, with periodic expression in secret or semi-private social interactions, and presenting the preferred gender expression. Many people will describe themselves as, well, I used to be a cross-dresser and then I became transgender, and there's that misconception that it's like a ladder. It's not. You were always transgender. And what pushed you to a decision to seek treatment of a medical sort is not a moving from being a cross-dresser to transgender. It was that you were always transgender and you're just trying to alleviate now your type 2 gender dysphoria. Because the what we perceive as cross-dressing was treating your type 1 gender dysphoria only. And so let's go to type 2 gender dysphoria. Type 2 gender dysphoria, these are symptoms that center around the physical body and can be treated medically. Medical treatments can include hormone replacement therapy, HRT, sex reassignment surgery, either male or female, mastectomies for transgender males, orchiectomies for transgender females, and or cosmetic surgeries and treatments such as laser hair removal, implants, these kind of things. An individual's feeling of need. Obviously not everybody feels they need so much, and other people feel they need more. So, this is why the individual treatment plan is necessary. Okay, now type 3 gender dysphoria. These are symptoms that center around physical attributes that cannot be changed through any medical or cosmetic treatment. Type 3 requires a psychological alteration in how the person sees the physical attribute. Activities 2 can be categorized as type 3. The activity doesn't change, but how we perceive it in relationship to ourselves does. And just to give a quick example, I'm extremely tall, and the reason that gender dysphoria, I had gender dysphoria around my height was because I was perceiving it as a strictly male feature. Every time somebody said, "Can you reach that on the top shelf?" I didn't feel like a girl anymore. I felt like a guy, and that's what was causing my gender dysphoria. So I had to. My height isn't going to change. I'm not going to, shrink until I get older. So I had to alter how I viewed my height, and I did eventually. It took some time, and I couldn't tell you exactly the steps to change your psyche in those areas, but I had to start viewing myself as simply as a tall girl, and that's how I view myself now. So my height doesn't really give me gender dysphoria. It irks me, definitely, because I will not allow myself to wear heels that I would like to wear because I already tower over everyone as it is. And I do get teased, for my height, but, that teasing, I view that as you're just teasing a really tall girl, just like you would tease any other really tall girl. So I altered how I perceive that, and that is type 3 gender dysphoria. Now, creating your personal treatment plan, I would suggest taking out a piece of paper, writing down type 1 expression, type 2 medical treatment, and type 3 stuff I can't change and have to get good with. And under that type 1 of expression, write down what it is you want to change within your expression that is going to alleviate your gender dysphoria. So it might be, and these are just examples, it might be your clothes, it might be your mannerisms, it might be your voice. Under type 2, it may be hormones, SRS, facial surgery, implants, electrolysis. Again, these are just examples. And under type 3, before somebody goes in and seeks treatment, they're very excited, they're very exuberant, and absolutely nothing. It's all going to get fixed and I'll be perfect. So anyway, that is your initial treatment plan. That is your treatment plan for you personally. And this is something you can work with your psychologist and they can help you start figuring these things out. But you determine what it is that gives you, because you have to do self-reflection. Dealing with gender dysphoria is not something that's going to go away if you wish it. You have to put in the work. And a lot of that work is self-reflection. What is actually bugging me? Because once you start hitting these things, that gender dysphoria is going to reduce, and you're going to be able to start thinking more clearly as to what is actually bugging me, that I need to change about myself so I can live a happy life. And so then your treatment plan changes. Within self-expression, again, I'm just giving examples. You may decide, I don't need to change my voice. Screw it, my voice is good. I don't care. And you cross that off your list. You've altered now your treatment plan. I don't need the facial surgery or the implants. I'm going to throw those things over into type 3, and I'm going to work on some features that I'm not good with now, but I feel I can get good with at some point. So then you've moved these things over to a type 3. In the type 3, again, it takes work, but these are things that your psychologist can help you with. Written out your treatment plan, I guarantee your psychologist is going to enjoy that because it gives them something tangible to actually work with. Now, here's my personal treatment plan. Initially it was within type 1 expression, clothes, makeup, shoes. I needed all that stuff. And the biggest piece for me was allowing my brain to work in its natural way and just stop fighting it. Because I had adopted a male persona, and it was extremely uncomfortable, but it was an extreme stereotype of what is male, is the persona that I tried to adopt. And so literally I would sit on my hands very often in order to stop them from creating mannerisms, because my brain just wants my hands to move. But I was sitting on my hands. And it was awful because I would rethink everything. Would a guy do this? Would a guy say this? I was constantly rethinking it because if I didn't, then comments were made. When I was in the military, I'd be among, because I was an Army Scout, and I'd be among the other scouts, and they would say something, and I would say something, and they would look at me very strangely and say, that's what my wife would say. And so I had to be very careful for decades, which is just a terrible, terrible thing. I found that when I just allowed my brain to work in its natural way, I freed up so much brain space. It was awesome. So anyway, that was on my thing. Now, my voice doesn't sound that great today. It's fine. But I knew I had to change my voice. When I was working for Kraft Foods, and my primary job was training and a lot of speaking. And because I had created that male persona, I wanted that booming male voice to go with it. So I had trained my voice to be extremely deep. It was rumbly in my chest. I knew I had to change that. When I went out to California, lived 3 years full time, I could look okay. People, at times, didn't know I was transgender. It was usually the fact that I was afraid all the time that gave me away more than anything else. But there were times where I was, okay, I'm doing it, I'm good, until I had to speak. So I would go through and do my grocery shopping, but it was really messing me up when I had to go to the checkout counter, because it's rare that you encounter another human being without having to utter a word. And as soon as I did, this booming voice would come out of me, and it would shock. I would see the shock on people's face, and that bothered me. So for 3 years, I just didn't speak. Well, the second time around, I knew that there were two things I was going to change. One, I was going to ditch the idea of stealth. I was going to ditch the idea of fear, and I was going to change the voice. So if you're interested, I did write a technique for changing your voice, and it's available on my book, which is available on my website. Now, type 2 medical for me, it has always been just hormones and an orchiectomy so I can go off hormones. And for me, that's all I want medically. That's all I personally need. And stuff I can't change and have to get good with. Like I said, my height, my broad shoulders, my huge feet that everyone teases me about, and some limited facial hair. Now, my facial hair doesn't really bother me too much, probably due to years and decades of stress. My beard is almost completely white, so it doesn't really show up that much. I have a few black stray hairs that I just pluck. But, having the facial hair, it makes me kind of like Cinderella. I can shave and I look good and blah, blah, blah. But it's only going to last so long. Eventually I'm going to turn into a pumpkin. So yeah. But I'm okay with it. I'm not going to go through the hassle of electrolysis. I'm just throwing that into my type 3. Hey, I'm good with it. Screw it. Move on with life. And then, so within my treatment plan, I just mark things off. I've taken care of the clothes, the makeup, and the shoes. I've got more shit than I know what to do with. I've allowed my brain to work in its natural way and stop fighting it. I've changed my voice so that I'm comfortable with it and can speak whenever I want. And so for me, my type 1 gender dysphoria is resolved. I've taken care of it. And to be honest, by doing that, I've taken care of 80% of my gender dysphoria. I have very limited gender dysphoria at this point. I am still on hormones under my type 2, and will remain on hormones until I manage to get an orchiectomy. And once I get the orchiectomy, then my type 2 is resolved as well. I can cross it off the list. Now, under my type 3, I've gotten good with my height. I don't like it, but it doesn't give me gender dysphoria anymore. My broad shoulders, I'm still working on that. I look in the mirror and think, good Lord, you look like a friggin' football player. And it's just my own perception. It's that skewed perception I have of myself. And the reason, I could get good with it and still not like my broad shoulders. But the reason it falls under the category of gender dysphoria is because I look at my broad shoulders and I see guy. I see guy immediately. And so that creates for me gender dysphoria. Now if I get good with it and still hate my broad shoulders, I'm just like any other girl who has broad shoulders and hates it. My huge feet that everyone teases me about, it doesn't bother me anymore. It's just, yeah, joke if you will. Whatever, screw you. And my limited facial hair. Like I said, I've gotten good with it. It's fine. It's no big deal. The hormones have taken care of the rate of growth is much slower. It's just not that big a deal. It's not enough to worry about. So anyway, that is what you do to create your personal treatment plan. Because if you try to just keep it in your head, if you don't lay it out so you can see it, you're not going to be able to work on these individual things. And I guarantee, as you work on each thing, as you cross things off your list, your gender dysphoria is going to go away. It's going to lessen and lessen and lessen. And you may find, because I've talked to people quite often, well, I adopted an expression, a self-expression that I enjoy. And I've been on the hormones. And now I feel, do I really need SRS? And I find that people change as to what they feel their need is. When we go into it, when we haven't sought treatment yet, and our gender dysphoria is raging, then we have strictly in our mind, I have to do everything. I have to be the perfect man or woman, or it's just not going to be enough. But as we start going through and addressing different things, then that perception of ourselves, softens. We start giving ourselves a break, and find that there's everybody in the world has things about themselves that they're not thrilled with, but we get good with those things. We have to, not everybody has cosmetic surgery just because they don't like a personal feature. But this is how you do it, and I really suggest you try doing this, and do this with your psychologist. Go through and write up your things, and then bring this to your psychologist so they can see them and they know specifically what it is they can help you work on and help you work through. And that's all I have for you right now. If you have any questions, this is going to be posted, so, place questions and comments. And I'll try to help you work through some things. But, again, gender dysphoria exists. It does. Whether other people say it doesn't, it does exist. And it doesn't go away by wishing it. So you have to be proactive in doing it. And even if you can't do everything that you want, if you do some things you want, you will alleviate the amount of gender dysphoria that you're having. I guarantee it. And that's all I have for you today. So I will talk to you later, and you have a wonderful day.